Okay, let us proceed probably to the next speaker.
Yes. Thank you, Professor. Our next speaker is Professor Vladimir Krasnov from Ukraine. Professor Krasnov has a PhD in pedagogy. Head of the medical department of Kiev's Medical University in Kiev, Ukraine. He is also head of the Ivory Integral Education Department. His presentation is entitled On the Theory of Social Gaps and Social Exclusion of Organizations. Thank you, Professor.
Да, дорогие друзья, здравствуйте.
Hello, dear friends.
Меня хорошо слышно.
I hope you could hear me.
Рад приветствовать всех делегатов конференции.
I'm really happy to welcome everyone here.
Хотела бы высказать благодарность всем, кто эту конференцию организовал.
I would like to thank everyone that helped to organize this conference. It's really a unique event. I really hope that this conference and by this format we can begin a scientific dialogue among the world community. I will begin my presentation. I will share my screen. I hope you can see it. I called it Towards a Theory of Social Gaps and Social Rejection of Organization. This is a number of ideas that I would like to present to you. I hope that it really will be able to create a foundation for the development of a number of theoretical directions that will later be implemented in practice. I will start by speaking about the theory of social gaps. If we look at the history of human development, we see that humanity is always pursuing a higher quality of life, as well as the satisfaction of basic needs. Here is Maslow needs pyramid. So over thousands of years, the quality of life depended directly on people's satisfaction of basic needs. We have cars. Before that, we used horses. Now we could fly, travel at great speed. We have internet. It all accelerates the speed of connections. These were two correlated processes. The quality of life depended directly on the quality of satisfaction of needs. But around the year 2000, there was a bifurcation, a division of these two processes, increasing the quality of meeting needs, continued to indeed, there were nanotechnologies, industry, artificial intelligence, so forth. But what's curious is that the quality of life did not increase proportionally to the rise in quality of satisfying our needs after the year 2000.
Я здесь хотел показать два достаточно любопытных таких эволюционных
I would
процесса.
like to show two
Первый
interesting
эволюционный
evolutionary
процесс,
processes. The
он
first
направлен в сторону
is aimed
социализации общества
at
или интеграции
socialization
общества.
of society or
Поскольку
integration of
общество
society.
всегда и человек всегда зависел от социальных
Society and
связей.
man have always
И если
developed,
помните,
depended on
древние
social
государства,
connections.
государственным наказанием
And
было
in
изгнание из общества.
antiquity, the worst
Это
punishment was
бессмертная казнь.
exile or expulsion
То
from
есть
society.
человек
This was
всегда
worse than the
зависел от
death
социума.
penalty. So a person
И по
always depended
сути
on
мы
society.
видим с вами, как идет глобализация мира,
And we are observing the globalization of the world,
развитие разных интеграционных
the
связей,
development of various
появляется
integrational
соцсети и так далее.
connections,
То есть
social
общество
networks, and so
все
forth.
сильнее становится
Society
связанным друг
is
с
becoming
другом.
more connected,
Процессы социализации или
and the
интеграции.
socialization and integration processes.
Если мы с вами посмотрим на ту же самую пирамиду потребностей
If we look
Маслоу,
at the same Maslow
по
pyramid of
сути, все
needs,
слои этой пирамиды, они
the layers of
напрямую
this
зависят
pyramid
или
depend directly
качество удовлетворения
on the
потребностей на
quality
каждом
of
слое напрямую
satisfying needs
зависит
at every
от
layer.
социальных связей.
For example, it
Только
depends on
физиологический
social
уровень
connections,
это условно
but the
независимый, условно
physiological
социально
degree
независимый уровень.
is a socially
Там
independent
необходимо
degree.
построение определенных
There,
минимум
a
семейных
specific
отношений.
minimum is required, such as family
Таким образом,
relationships and so forth.
степень удовлетворения потребностей
So the degree of
зависит от социума.
satisfying the needs depends on society.
Здесь на этом слайде я показываю такое
Here
шуточное
on this slide,
доказательство.
this is kind of a
Если
humorous,
мы вспомним
a
исторические
comic
такие
proof.
примеры или эксперименты
If we
исторические,
look at historical
человек
experiments or
попадал на
examples,
необитаемый
when a
остров на
person
долгое
found
время,
himself
потом его
at a
находили через
deserted
3
island for a
года,
long
через
time,
5 лет,
and they would find him after 5 years,
вот, то по сути человек деградировал
then the
до
person
самого
would
примитивного
degrade
уровня.
to the most primitive level,
Невзирая на то, какие у него были возможности
despite any
удовлетворить свои
opportunities
потребности. Он был
they had to satisfy
То
their
есть он
necessities.
терял модели
The
подтверждения
person
социальных
lost the
потребностей.
models of
И
social
если у
necessities.
человека нет демонстрации этих
And if a person does not have a
моделей
demonstration of these models,
потребностей, то
of
по сути
needs,
он соскальзывал до
then
самого
the person
примитивного.
degrades to the most primitive level.
Это я показал одну эволюционную составляющую.
That was one
Другая
evolutionary
эволюционная
component.
составляющая
The other
общества,
evolutionary
очень
component of
часто
society
десятилетиями или тысячелетиями
that
общество эволюционировало в
evolved
сторону
through thousands of
индивидуализма
years,
или дезинтеграции.
society evolved towards
Индивидуализм
individualism or
я здесь
disintegration.
представляю как
Individualism
только
is
личное
understood as
целое
the
развитие без
paradigm
учета
of
общества.
seeing only personal
Все
developmental
время
goals
стремился
without
себя таким
considering
образом, чтобы
society.
попытаться
So
максимально получить от
man built
общества
up
и
his
при
life in a
этом
way
быть
that he would be
социально
independent of
независимым,
society
все-таки отрезанным
while
от
satisfying his
общества.
needs from society. So he would be cut off from society.
Таким образом, здесь прозвучали вроде бы две
So,
противоречивых эволюционных
so these were two contradictory evolutionary
одна эволюционная
directions.
составляющая
One
развивается в
evolutionary
сторону
component
социализации,
develops
другая
towards
эволюционная
socialization, and the
составляющая
other
развивается в
evolutionary
сторону
component
индивидуализма или
develops toward
дезинтеграции.
individualism or disintegration.
Подтверждение еще индивидуалистического направления мы с вами видим, как
As
активно
evidence of
набирает
the
популярность тренинги
individualistic
личностного
direction,
роста.
we
Это
see
должен быть
the
один,
popularity of
должен
trainings
достичь,
of personal
невзирая ни на
growth.
что.
You have to succeed by
В системах
yourself
образования
despite
это
anything.
индивидуальная
In
траектория
educational
обучения.
system, these
В
are
политике, в
individual forms
социальных
of
системах
study.
популярность
In
набирают, например,
social
квартиры студии.
systems,
Это когда
studio apartments are
молодые люди не в
popular where
состоянии
young
даже
people
организовать семью.
cannot even organize a
Им
family.
гораздо удобнее и
It's
комфортнее
much more
жить
comfortable and
одиночке в
convenient to live
квартире.
alone
Они
in an
на
apartment
какое-то время, знаете, как
and
говорят, семья выходного дня,
for some time,
вот, съехаться на пару
like
часов,
to move in for a few hours or for a few days
надоедают и
with a
опять
partner, and
возвращаются.
then they get sick of each other
Таким
and
образом,
move out.
здесь показаны два
So in this
диаметрально
way,
противоположных направления.
this shows two
Социализация,
diametrically
индивидуализм,
opposite directions:
интеграция.
socialization,
Детали состоит в
integration
том,
versus
что
individualism
эти
and
две
disintegration.
эволюционных составляющих
And these two evolutionary
существуют
components
одновременно.
they exist at the same time. And what's unique is that because they exist at the same time, in society, there's a social pressure that escalates and begins to bring to social gaps. Nominally, a threshold cycle could be described of the social pressure. Social pressure escalates, it leads to stress. A person or society begin to exhibit deviant behavior in search of fulfillment. Then the two extremes exacerbate even more, and they come back to the social pressure. One effect of social gaps is the smiling depression, which is a socially approved, happy appearance of a person while they're depressed. When a person has everything, they have a good profession, society needs them, they have entertainment. So externally, they have to show a happy appearance, but it's actually a disaster. Depression. Depression is one of the 10 or 5 percentile of diseases that lead to incapacity. So when social pressure arises, there should be a scenario of compensating for it. So points of pressure are diagnosed by psychologists and various specialists, and they begin looking for channels to relieve social pressure. Here, we can point out a destructive scenario of letting out the social pressure. The destructive scenario is manipulation of mass consciousness. Here is a small list, not complete list, of how this happens. When people are persuaded that the condition they are in is the best one, and so this includes legalization of drugs as one way to relieve social pressure, speculation on national identity. The national idea can be really played up a lot, and as well as having an external enemy. So society, there begins to be external hysteria. The classical example is when society begins to consolidate. This is a destructive scenario. There have been many examples of this. Now, for the constructive scenario, I will leave this as a question for now, and I will come back to it later. Now, another theory, the theory of social repulsion of formal organizations. There have been various social institutes and organizations, and they're all classified as formal organizations. So just a word about the notion of social rejection. Sociology and psychology has developed this very well, the interaction between the individual and society. This is the sequence of problematic components where the interaction between real potential capabilities of man, and there is a psychological disposition from individual and society, and the connections between society are severed, and all of this leads to effects like poverty, crime, social passivity. There's a stressful psychological state disorders, so this has negative results. So this is the social rejection. Now, the system of interactions of social organization. Any organization arises when necessities arise in society. And society begins to look for ways to satisfy this necessity. Various social organizations arise. A society has a need for health, so they created the Ministry of Health, all kinds of health foundations and so forth. The social organization begins to fulfill its social function. The need is fulfilled in one form or another, and the need continues to develop. Society does not stand still. So this is a classical harmonious cycle. But at a certain point, a notion can emerge as the dysfunction of the social cycle. This dysfunction is a social organization stops, no longer satisfies the social needs, and automatically it begins to elicit social rejection. So now a few words about dysfunction of a social institute. This is also a very developed topic in sociology that speaks about the disruption of normative interaction. From the point of view of society and external observers, the goal becomes unclear, uncertain functions, and so the priority of the organization is reduced. And so this organization just becomes symbolic or ritual. One example is personalization of the functionality of an institute is when a manager is replaced and the organizations begins to reflect the ideology of just one person. And this affects the entire system or hierarchy of this formal organization. There are many examples here as well over the course of history. As I've already said, a system that ceases to satisfy the needs of society, when the needs exceed the development of society, this activates the effect of social rejection. And if society does not find other ways to fulfill its need, then aggression arises against this organization. It could be an organization, a company, it dies out and disappears. The question arises, what social necessity needs to be satisfied when we are speaking of a social need that exceeds its satisfaction? The historically developed social needs and means of their satisfaction is no longer it no longer satisfies society, but the new needs are unclear. And so this social uncertainty, when the needs of its society the satisfaction does not arrive, although we have all the possibilities according to the pyramid, it leads to a huge number of social pressures, stresses, aggression. A search for solutions. I will start to look at the root cause that sets all these effects in motion. Although the main cause of social gaps and social rejection is the inability to satisfy the evolutionary needs of society, which could nominally be called self-actualization. So humanity is searching for the meaning of life, and the problem becomes worse and worse, especially in the education system. The youth, it is not interested in the formal traditional education system because the teachers they provide knowledge, but they do not answer the key question that interests the children. What do we need all of this knowledge for? What is the meaning of life? So this latent need that I'm talking about, and I will continue to talk about it, working with this latent necessity, this concealed necessity, it is not yet clear. So the destructive direction, all formal organizations are now trying to solve problems in various replacing notions, auto-aggression, actualizing needs of a lower level, when they try to prove to people that it's very important to fulfill all these needs. It's important to travel, to keep buying something, and so forth. So they are trying to impose a model of behavior, of consumption, of relentless consumption. And there's the constructive direction, which is active explanations, formation and education of the right model of behavior according to the work with the new necessity. So what is this new necessity? What should we do? We have to change the human being's worldview and renew the connection between people on a more qualitative level. I found this visualization on the internet, and they're asking, who wants change? Everyone wants change. This is from a United Nations website. So everyone wants change. How do we want things to change? But nobody wants to change. So what is this root or latent necessity about the meaning of life? The effect of social gaps, where we have individualism and socialization. We don't need to fulfill either need or either direction. Rather, what we need above them to build a unifying overarching structure. When we speak about the formation of thought or worldview of the following degree, all of humanity advanced to the system of opposition. Me against society. There's me and there's society. And my main goal, this is how I was brought up, is to receive the most I can from society, to satisfy my needs as much as I can through society. If the society is wealthy and has many resources, then there won't be sharp contradictions. The problems arise when society cannot satisfy the needs of the individual, then resources decrease. We could see the fall of the economy now and so forth. So there is a drastic rise in the social pressure because everyone hopes that through society, they will fulfill their needs. And here we could speak about the need to expand individualism. The individualism remains and does not disappear, where I begin to see the dependency between personal goals of development on social ones. The process of integration of individual and society. It's called the effect or direction of social responsibility, where there's an understanding that social welfare is on the same degree as my own welfare. So it's an expansion of the individual's worldview to the degree of society and to the degree of the entire planet. When my well-being and the well-being of the whole social environment, I begin to perceive them in the same way. So this is my final slide about the therapy of social gaps. It's necessary to set up systems of monitoring satisfaction, informing this latent or hidden need for the search for the meaning of life, and formation of a world view on the level of social responsibility. It is necessary to have an explanatory campaign, because very few are speaking about this. The transparency of the work. Unfortunately, society has been increasingly distrustful of mass media. Formulating the latent needs of the evolving society, a clarification or articulation of what the society really needs. Everyone is speaking about this, but where do we go? There is very little information about that. So, avoiding agents of influence in the informational space, the whole system of fake news and so forth, and the generation of critical thinking in people, the capability to analyze and assume responsibility for the society in which one lives. That was it. Thank you so much. I hope you were able to hear. I think
Thank you so much, Professor. We do have one question. The question is from Oksana. Who might start global solidarity and what form?
Если не сложно, могли бы помочь с переводом, чтобы я нюансы вопроса понял.
Could someone please translate the question for me?
Можно еще раз вопрос? Я не слышала. Секунду.
Я могу в данном случае перевести, кто бы мог бы начать этот процесс глобальной
Who can start this process of global solidarity?
Спасибо за вопрос.
Thank you for the question.
Прежде всего, тот, кто
First of all,
предложит не
the one
только
that will propose
концепцию
not only a concept
социальной ответственности,
of social
но
responsibility,
тот, кто
but
может
one
в
who is
каком-то
able
сообществе, как
to,
модель,
in some society or
продемонстрировать
community, as a model,
работоспособность.
to demonstrate its
Ну, потому
viability,
что теоретических изысканий
because
очень много,
there are
а
very many
практически,
theoretical
на самом деле, которые
kind of
хотя бы
theories,
на
but in
более-менее
practical terms,
сообществе, которое могло бы быть
a society
репрезентативным
that can
по
represent
отношению ко всему, ну, давайте, населению Земли, действительно
everything with
продемонстрировать,
regards to
что
the
данная
planet's population,
концепция,
to
она
demonstrate this
приводит
concept.
к результату.
Then this leads to results.
Спасибо.
Thank you.
Если можно, я хотел бы немножко тогда уточнить. Вот, если
I would
говорить
like to
действительно об
clarify.
изменении в
If you are
обществе, то,
speaking
наверное, прежде
about
всего мы должны иметь в виду
social change,
образование.
there must
Как
be
вы видите
education.
вот те процессы изменения,
As you see the
какие точно изменения
processes
нужны
of
в
change,
образовании,
what
чтобы
are the changes that must happen
добиться
in
этих
education
эффектов, которые
in order to achieve these effects that you spoke about?
Спасибо большое за вопрос.
Thank you very much for the question.
Тут просто я, получается, сейчас опять начну отвечать по кругу.
I will again begin to answer according to the cycle of the need to develop a concept, the need to develop a program, not only for education but upbringing, and then modeling through small groups and proof through objective factors that this model is viable and effective. Where do we start? To be honest, I have not seen any developed concepts that are not just theoretical, but that contain an action plan and a proof and evidence that this works. And I very much hope that within this Erie Institute, there are many ideas, because in other organizations, I have not encountered that so much has been done in this direction. And therefore, this is why my presentation was called Towards a Theory. I would be happy to name it an action plan. Unfortunately, I don't have this program. But it's necessary to work in this direction. I think there's no need to even to invite people to a call to action. It's obvious that previous formats do not work. And how should we work? This should be a team of experts that will say that what is the cause of the problem? Here is the program that eliminates the cause of the problem. And in these two theories, I tried to get to the root cause that leads to the problem. I understand that this is not a singular cause. There is an interconnected conglomerate of causes of the foundational system of man's worldview. And it's important not to change man, because man will resist this to the last, but it's important to give a specific model based on which man could use the old base that he received from the ancestors, all the previous models that have been developed. We cannot break these models. If we start to break it, we will get an enormous cognitive dissonance and stress, and we will annihilate man. The human individual is a model of accumulated models, and therefore it's necessary to provide a harmonious overstructure above the existing models of behavior that will not elicit disharmony, but that will provide an energetic additional effect by which humanity will be able to fulfill and formalize and clearly understand what is the need that we nominally call the meaning of life, and fulfill it properly, and then advance and develop towards the next evolutionary leap. Your presentation was really beautiful indeed, but it is aimed, it convinces, it explains, but I think one of the key aspects is not outside of man, it's inside man. The man has reached the threshold of the development. Previously, there was a reverse connection between society and individual. The more you contribute, the more you receive. But now a man is receiving reverse feedback, and this leads to the destruction and depression. And I think if we wait for a method, of course, in the new situation, no method can work until it's tested, so it needs to be both. But the question is, clearly, right now, society does not sufficiently want change, but if we receive another blow, we need to start trying organizing society properly so we can do this practically. For now, there's no method. There's just an understanding of the general laws of the problems of the subconscious. And how can we start doing this work? because I think we need to look at this from both ends, practice below and building a theory above. Thank you. I will try to answer briefly because we're out of time. I agree completely that the rational does not always work. It works to a specific degree until it begins to contradict this inner cognitive perception. And therefore, I know essentially, let me name two mechanisms to break a person psychologically in order to change them. There are many directions doing this, but that's not our method, because it's not difficult to break a person, but then he will be a broken psychological cripple. But the other direction is what we said, education, but education by means of the social environment. At this conference, this has been voiced several times. Why the social environment? Very simple. This is the only mechanism that nature genetically implanted in us that allows us to evade the social defense. The cognitive defense really notices the contradiction between my sensation and worldview and what I'm told. This cognitive dissonance or defense arises, but to evade this cognitive defense is to place a social environment that will provide a behavioral model that a person can be interested in, but a person does not yet have this model of behavior. So from what I know from psychology, this is the only mechanism that's stress-free. It's, I don't want to say reforming man, but the stress-free transition of man to another model of behavior. And where do we find this society that will demonstrate this proper behavioral model and that's socially oriented? That's another question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor.
Thank you.
Thank you. We do have one more question. Are there any similar ideas in other academic institutions?
Вопрос, есть ли похожие мысли, подобные мысли в других научных институтах, в других разработках?
Are there other developments like this in other academic institutions? Thank you for the question. I wrote an article that is called The Concepts of Social Rejections. It hasn't been published yet. I prepared it. I did not analyze everything that exists in the world, but the material that I examined through my searches, through my research, I was unable to find. And I would be very grateful if there are references, if anyone knows of others who work in these directions. I would be grateful for this information. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor.